On today's Community Wednesday, let's break down a subscriber's CQB Grau. I've talked about the Grau and shown its stats and done updates on it despite never doing a true stat guide on it. But since we're used to the stats and my optimized builds, let's compare it to a more interesting type of loadout. I was given 3 options, one with a grip and an optic, one without an optic and no stock, and one with no grip and no stock. I'll be going with the no grip and no stock option, and this will make sense once I get to the stats. So the question is if it'll work in a big map like Warzone, since they only use it in multiplayer and in Rebirth. So let's find out. In this build, we'll be using the monolithic suppressor, the drifter barrel, GI mini reflex, 60 round mag, and no stock. Now let's take a look at the stats, starting with mobility. It has an amazing ADS time of 150 milliseconds. This is competing against CQB weapons and beating many sniper support weapons. Its reload and reload add times are 2.7 seconds from empty and 2.15 with 1 bullet in the mag. And with the mag cap of 60, that's pretty good. Its movement and sprint speeds are way above average for a long range assault rifle, but this is not a long range build. But it actually does get similar speeds to a Cold War assault rifle that has been built for speed. Now its ADS strafe speed is 2.74 meters per second, which is pretty much what we expect from a decent sniper support weapon. And then its sprint out and tac sprint out times are 270 and 390 milliseconds, which is average for a long range assault rifle, but not so great for a CQB loadout. And its stability is 2.5 TL, which isn't really great for longer ranges. But if you stick to close range, you won't really notice. Its bullet velocity is 540.5 meters per second, which misses the mark of the 600 we usually want for sniper support weapons, but if you use this for closer ranges, it won't matter. And lastly, its rate of fire is 12.21 rounds per second or 733 rounds per minute, which is pretty good. So it gets a mobility score of 38. Now before we get into the recoil score, I want to compare and show you a few builds, and show you why I ended up choosing this specific one. So first, here is the optic with the rubber grip. I usually tell people not to use the rubber grip, and this is going to show you why. And this is what it looks like when we remove the rubber grip. So it has only 4 attachments. As you can see, it barely makes a difference, and that's because attachments don't stack the way you think. And the ZLR drifter barrel is actually helping you quite a lot already. And now, this is what it looks like when we put the no stock attachment instead of the rubber grip. Depending on when it starts the aiming stability pattern, it's going to have either 20 or 30% more recoil. And since the Grau already has pretty good recoil to begin with, and since we don't plan on using this for long range, it doesn't really matter. Just make your build more like you want it. Get more mobility so that it's better in close quarters. As for the optic, it helps you track targets at slightly longer ranges, especially since the gun will be shaking quite a lot. So with this specific setup, you can actually use it up to 40 meters, which is a bit surprising, but not really since it is the Grau after all. So it gets a recoil score of 31. Now for its damage. Because of the attachment setup, it actually has its drop-off point at 27 meters. In the first damage range, it's exactly like the normal Grau that we're used to. TTKs really aren't that great, and it's not set up to be a close quarters weapon. You need 2 headshots in order to reduce it, which is entirely possible due to its higher rate of fire, but you do have to work for it. However, in the second damage range, where I expect it to be used if it gets used as a sniper support weapon, it's once again the same types of colors that we're used to. However, the numbers are different this time. At 27 meters, it's already getting 10 more milliseconds to its TTK than the normal Grau does at 46 meters. And this is because of its extremely low bullet velocity. But remember, this is already at 27 meters. Between 27 and 35 meters, you're going to be losing a lot of gunfights to most assault rifles. Even if you hit 1 headshot to reduce your shots to kill by 1, those assault rifles are still in their first damage range. But outside of that range, the further you go, the longer your TTK is going to be because your bullets really will need that much time to get to them. But thankfully, you can always get 1 headshot and still get a pretty okay TTK. So it gets a damage score of 40. And when we add all the categories, it gets a final score of 109. Now this is a pretty normal score for a CQB SMG, but this is not a CQB SMG. Its point distribution looks very similar, but as you can see in the damage section, it's not the same. When you look at the individual values though, you can see that, at least in damage, that at close range, the CQB SMG gets a pretty great score, while the Grau just keeps an overall below average score. But when we compare it to a sniper support weapon, the score is much lower. The mobility score is a bit low compared to it, and the damage is much lower. The damage though is the most important part, because a good sniper support weapon should be able to compete pretty well at close range and at further ranges. There's no reason that the PPSH should be better than the Grau at this range. If the Grau was built for range though, it wouldn't be. Here's the table that I've shown you before, and you can see that it still gets a damage score of 40. But you can see that the first damage range extends to 46 meters. So definitely beyond 33 meters, the Grau will beat the PPSH. And beyond 46 meters, even though the Grau does have a slower rate of fire and they have a very similar damage profile, the Grau's still gonna win because it has a much better bullet velocity. So it'll be reaching its target almost twice as fast. But there's one important thing that I have to say about the CQB Grau that was presented here. It does have an advantage when it comes to ADS time. If you manage to see an enemy at the same time, and you both start ADSing and firing, and you lose your ADS penalty first, there's a good chance that you're probably gonna win. However, if they even hit a few shots in there, you're still gonna lose. And if they're running an SMG, they're probably gonna have a much better ADS spread than you anyways. So does the CQB Grau succeed in close range? Theoretically, no. Any viable weapon that is being used in its intended damage range and role will be beating the CQB Grau. And that's just because the CQB Grau was meant to be a long-range, low-recoil, low-damage assault rifle. Because remember, they did try to rework assault rifles to make them less useful at close range so that you would actually have to use SMGs and shotguns. So I'm not saying that you can't use the CQB Grau, it's just, it's going to be a lot easier to use pretty much anything else. So that was the CQB Grau. Have you ever run a build like this? And if so, what do you think about it? And even if you haven't run one, what do you think about the setup? And do you think that the stats accurately reflect its performance? But as always, if there's any weapon, build, or part of the game you want to break down, let me know and you may see it on the next Community Wednesday. Thanks for watching.